fed up with the violence, the burglary, and the crime in their neighborhood. They did want their kids to go down the wrong path in life. So they packed their bags and headed south to Johnson County, Kansas, in a town named Old Lake, Kansas. His parents brought their first luxury home with 4 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms. TJ also moved in with them. Chris and Moose did not want to leave the neighborhood. They were caught up in the street life. Their parents left them the house on 6th Street. They would come out and visit from time to time. And Tony, Nick, Crump, TJ would go back to their old neighborhood, but Moose and Chris did not want his little brothers down there because they were selling drugs. Moose and Chris' drug house, they would have people over from the neighborhood, LaRon Mitchell and others. Moose and LaRon would smoke the drug PCP. In the black community, they called it wet. The dope fiends would buy crack and smoke it at the drug house in a room. The dope fiends loved Moose because he was not like any other drug dealer. He had a heart for them. Moose had the boys in the neighborhood working for him who would make drug deals and split the profit. One night, Tony was with his brother. Moose was driving his black Mustang. Moose stopped at a couple places in the city. Moose drove around the corner from his house. There was a man in the street whose name was Big Sean Freeman. Moose stopped to talk to him from the car. Moose called his name a few times, but was ignoring him. They finally talked for a few seconds, and Moose drove off. Tony said to Moose he faked, and Moose said, "How you go call someone fake?" And Moose was mad. Moose had a drug house at the home where he grew up on 6th Street. He had friends over, whose name was Meats, and Tony was there in the living room. Meats had a conversation with his brother Booby. They was talking about killing someone. Tony thought they were talking about his brother. Moose wasn't aware of the conversation that Meats had. A week later, TJ called the house and said somebody got shot in your neighborhood. It was from the Green family, Jenny Green, who was the one shot in the neighborhood and later died. In that same week, Meats was picked up by the police. Chris Graves noticed he was being followed by Meats' brother. Booby would turn off and go another way. When Chris get near his house on 6th Street, Meats was sentenced to the murder of Jenny Green. On another night of 2003, Tony was at his home, and the phone rang. Tony answered, and it was his big brother Moose. And Moose said, "What you want for Christmas?" Tony said, "The Grand Theft Auto Vice video game." And Moose said, "All right, I'll be out there." And they both hang up the phone. Tony waited for his brother to get there because he wanted to play the game. It was getting late. Tony said to himself, "Why it's taken so long?" Tony was tired and went to bed. In the middle of the night, Tony heard his mama on the phone, and she said, "Not my son, you got the wrong Jesse." Tony knows something was wrong, but could not figure it out. Tony found out his brother Moose was in a bad car wreck. He hit a pole and flew through the windows on Shawnee Mission Parkway, and Chris said Moose had money on him. There was no money at the scene. At the time, Chris was mad at Moose because Moose told Chris don't sell dope no more. While Moose was in the hospital, Nick got a cold or flu and was sick and was at Old Lake the medical center. When Nick got out the hospital, Nick and Tony was dropped off at Chris' house on 6th Street. They was there a few minutes. Tony heard a knock on the door, and it was Bear, whose real name is Sean Freeman, and he asked what happened. He looked at Nick's arm because he had a hospital patient bracelet on. With an evil look, Sean Freeman left up his shirt halfway in and asked Nick, "Was you in the car with Moose?" Nick said no, and Sean Freeman said okay and let down his t-shirt. And he left. Tony know he had something to do with his brother Moose car wrecking. Chris did not want to see his brother Moose in the hospital because he was mad at him, but he went anyways. Everybody was there from his dad's side of the family and his mama's side of the family. Tony and his cousin Tony Green talked to Moose while he was in a coma. On another day, Tony saw his brother all mess up. Moose tried to talk but could not. His tongue was flapping out his mouth. Tony said to himself he will be all right. Moose stay in the hospital for months while Nick and Tony was at home bringing their friends in the house that should not be there. Tony shot one of his neighbor with a BB gun while their mama and daddy were at the hospital. And on another night, Tony and Nick was at their friend's house. Lisa Branson and Nick got a call, and it was his mama. She said Moose was gone. Everybody in the family think Moose was high on wet, the drug PCP. But Moose's longtime friend, who was in the penitentiary, who told us he was chased down in his car.
That ain't coming home this year, just like the fellas in prison. We miss you so much for real. What about the children who ran away? That ain't coming home today. Well, here's a message from coast to coast. Cause when them thugs really need it the most, a thug holiday.
Just like 'em, 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 just like 'em.
Tony and Nick would bring white girls from Old Lake to Kansas to their neighborhood on 6th Street, to Chris' drug house. Sometime Chris would be mad but was cool with it. One night Tony and Nick friends wanted some weed, so they drove to the city to Chris' drug house on 6th Street. Chris opened the door and Chris' cousin Marcus was there. And Chris' friend TZ was selling crack with Chris at the house. Tony heard a knock on the door and TZ opened it, and it was Chris' friend whose name is Julius Beasley, who lived up the street. TZ left Julius to close the door. Julius lifted up on the door and looked out the door window both ways with evil eyes. Tony seen it and was nervous, and TZ and Julius went in the room where Chris was at and played fight with Chris. Marcus seen Julius and TZ play fighting, and Marcus ran through the kitchen and came in the other way in the room. Marcus said to Julius, "I know you was going to do that." Tony was scared and got up and went upstairs to find a gun. He looked around but did not find nothing and went back downstairs, and Julius left the house. Minutes go by and again somebody knocked on the door, and it was Julius' brother Paul. He came in and sit with everybody, and a song came on, and he was rapping to the beat, saying out loud, "I will kill 7 people." And the white girls who was with Tony and Nick eyes lit up, and Tony counted the people who was in the house. Tony know he was talking about them. Paul left a few minutes later, and Tony and Nick left with the white girl 20 minutes after, going back to Old Lake to Kansas. Nick and his little brother Crumb and their friend CJ, they all went to Chisholm Trail Middle School. When Nick finished middle school, he went to Old Lake, the South High School, where there is 20% of black students and rest of the population is white. While Nick was in high school, he met a white boy whose name is Cody Branson, who smoked weed and listened to rap music and stayed around the corner from Nick's house. Nick's friend Cody invited Nick over to his house to smoke weed and to meet his mom, Lisa Branson. She asked Nick, "Where are you from?" Nick said, "Kansas City, Kansas." And Nick said, "I got a twin named Tony, and my friends TJ and J Mail are at my house." Lisa said, "I want to meet them." So she drove around the corner to Nick's house with her daughters, one of them named Jenica. That same week, Lisa called Nick and said TJ is cute and wanted his brother and friends to come over to her house and hang out. So they all walked over to her house. They all went in and went upstairs to a living room. They all were sitting down, and Lisa asked TJ to come in the room. Lisa said, "My husband is at work." And TJ went in the room, and moaning sound was coming from Lisa, and her daughter Janika was sitting next to the door and was talking to everybody. Lisa opened the door and was scared. She thought her husband was there, but she continued what she was doing and was moaning again. And Lisa and TJ came out the room, and her daughter Janika said she liked Tony and his friend J Mail and their friend CJ. JML said, "Do you have a girlfriend already?" The year 2004, on 6th Street, Chris was inside his car, a blue Cadillac, with his little brother Tony. Chris asked Tony, "Do you want something to eat?" Tony said, "Yeah." So Chris drove around the corner to a Chinese restaurant on Quindaro. Chris ordered something and Tony ordered orange chicken. They got the food and drove back to their neighborhood up the street to Rusty and Dude's house to get Tony hair braided by Rusty Mama Diane. Rusty Mama came to the car and got the $20 from Chris. Tony seen Rusty standing by his car in the yard and walking up to Chris' car. Rusty asked Chris, "Can you hook up my radio?" Chris said, "Yes, I can do it." And Rusty said, "Come on, man." Chris said, "I will be back." And Tony got out the car and went in Rusty's house. Rusty Mama started to braid Tony's hair. About 20 minutes later, she was done. Tony heard somebody knocking on Rusty's door, and Rusty came running down the stairs. He answered the door, and the guys wearing all red, one guy was light-skinned, and the other one dark-skinned. They came in the house asking, "Where is Teeny Weeny? Where is Teeny Weeny?" They asked Rusty to get the 38, and they all went upstairs. By that time, Tony was nervous and wanted to leave. They came in the living room where Tony was at. Tony said, "What's up?" to the guys who came in the house. They waited around for about 5 minutes and left. Tony said to himself, "I can't be here. I need to tell Chris somebody trying to kill him." So Tony got up and went out Rusty door. He looked both ways to see if the guys were outside. Tony ran down the street to Chris' house, where Tony grew up at. Tony knocked on the door, and dude answered the door, Rusty brother. Tony waited for about an hour to see if Chris would show up, and Chris came to his house a few minutes later. And Tony, Chris, and dude left the Chris house on 6th Street, heading to Old Lakeland to take Tony back home for school the next day. Tony wanted to tell Chris somebody was trying to kill him, but he did not because of Rusty brother was there in the car. On another night in 2004, Tony was with his brother Chris and Chris' friend who named is Dude who lived up the street. Chris stopped by his drug house on 8th Street. Chris got out the car and went in the house. Tony and Dude stay in the car. Tony seen a white Oldsmobile with 4 doors coming down the street, and the Oldsmobile stopped and made a crooked turn. It was like somebody was telling the driver directions. Tony asked Chris' friend who was in the car with him, "Do you know who that is?" Chris' friend said no with a smile on his face. But Tony already knew the answer, that he did. 10 minutes later, Chris came out the house, got back in the car and left, and drove to move Shane Wheat house on 18th Street. Chris got out the car and went in the Wheat house. By that time, Tony was nervous thinking about that white Oldsmobile. Chris got the weed and was walking back to the car. Tony seen a light-skinned guy with braids running toward Chris, but stopped and went inside the Wheat house. Chris got in the car and drove to his neighborhood, up the street to his friend Dude's house. Chris parked in the front of the house and rolled up a blunt, and Tony seen that same white Oldsmobile coming up the street and driving past the house. After that, Chris lighted a blunt and passed it to Dude, and Chris drove off, heading to Old Lake because Tony had to go to school the next day. Tony seen that same white Oldsmobile again, following next to them on the highway by Overland Park, Kansas. Tony wanted to tell Chris, but he wanted to tell him without Dude in the car, so he would not know. Chris got to his mama's house in Old Lake, Kansas, and all three went in the house. 5 minutes later, Tony looked out the door, and Tony seen the white Oldsmobile again, parked next door in a neighbor driveway. Tony went in and told Chris, "This white car is following us." Chris did not believe Tony. Tony was asleep, and Nick came and woke Tony up and said Chris got shot. And Tony said, "I just had a dream about Chris getting shot." Nick said, "This for real?" And the house phone rang. Nick answered it, and it was Mia Taylor on the phone. Sean Wright, baby mama, and said Chris is dead. Tony went to his window in his room and looked out at the blinds and seen the same white Oldsmobile car that was following Chris. Tony seen 4 people in the car, and the driver was a heavy-set guy driving down his street in the smoke. Chris' friend Roscoe heard the news and rushed over to Tony's house, and he was sad and asked Tony and Nick, "How are y'all doing?" They both said not good. Roscoe asked, "Who you think killed Chris?" Tony said Meek's brother, because of what happened to Meeks, because he killed Jimmy. They all talked for about 1 hour, and Roscoe left. Tony found out later that Warren Jones was the driver to the white Oldsmobile, who was from 6th Street.
All the world, cuz. My nigga Blue right there, man. What you say, nigga?
Tony, his little brother Crumb, his uncle Tyrone, and his mama in her van went to Chris' friend's house on 5th Street to get the money for Chris' suit for his funeral. When they got there, Chris' friends were outside fixing on a car. There was TC, Dude, and Julius. Julius said, "Hold on," and Chris' friends went in the house. 25 minutes goes past, and Tony told everybody, "We need to leave. This don't feel right. Why are they in the house so long?" Tony seen a gray Lincoln coming down the street and park, and seen Julius' brother Paul get out the car and went in the house. And another 15 minutes goes by, and they all came out the house. Crum got out the van and was talking, and Julius got into the van in the back seat where Tony was sitting at. Tony was sitting on the left side, and Julius was sitting on the right side next to Tony. On the side Tony was sitting at, there was no doors. The only way to get out the van is going around the seat to the other seat and get out on the right side. The van only had one door that slide open on the right side. Tony did not say nothing to Julius. Tony was looking forward. Tony knew what they was trying to do. Tony seen Julius' brother Paul putting both of his hands on the van doors blocking Tony, and at that time Tony looked over at Julius and seen Julius slowly taking a small black gun out his back pocket. Julius seen Tony looking and put the gun back. He said, "I got to hit this blunt real quick." And Julius got out the van, and Julius gave Tony mom the money for Chris' suit. The week of Chris' funeral, Tony mom was tired of Tony calling the police and saying people was trying to kill him and need to get himself together for Chris' funeral. So she drove to Research Hospital, the psychiatric center for mental health in Kansas City, Missouri. When they got there, a black nurse was at a desk and told Tony and his mom to have a seat. And the black nurse started to talk to Tony mom. She asked what he coming in for. Tony mom said paranoid, schizophrenia. And Tony said, "I don't need to be here and do not want to go in." And the nurse asked Tony mom, who is his legal guardian. Tony mom said she is. Tony had no choice but to go in. Tony mom left the hospital, and they took Tony upstairs to the mental health inpatient unit, and Tony went to sleep. The next day, Tony was in the TV room watching TV, and Tony seen a man coming off the elevator. On his unit, one was a black man, the other was a white man. They talked to the nurse at the desk and came and got Tony and took him downstairs on the elevator to a room with low light and told Tony to lay down on the bed. And the white man took out a needle and stuck Tony with it. When the needle was in Tony, his whole body got hot and wanted to pee on himself. And the white man said to Tony, "You took it like a man." And they took Tony back upstairs to the unit, and it was dinner time. As Tony was walking down the hall, his whole body got hot and felt like he was going to pass out. Tony was seeing black with his eyes going in and out, but Tony pushed himself to get in line and get his food. As Tony was sitting down, his body got hot again, and Tony set his dress over his food, and everything got better. After Tony was done eating, he went back to the unit, and the doctor wanted to talk to him. The doctor asked Tony, "Let me take a look at your penis." Tony hesitated to show him. The doctor said to Tony, "Are you ashamed?" Tony said yes, and the doctor left. A couple hours passed, and Tony went to use the bathroom, and he had blood in the toilet stool, and told the nurse, and they said they will tell the doctor. But nothing happened. That same week, Tony got out the hospital, and Tony's mom asked him, "Did they give you that medicine?" Tony said yes. The week before, Tony's mom was at the hospital named Olathe Medical Center, and she too was stuck with a needle. The doctor and nurse told her that was medicine she need in her body. A month go past, and Tony started to lose weight, and Tony, seeing the members of his household was losing weight also, and Tony put the pieces together. The story somebody told Tony is Chris was at his drug house on 22nd in Lafayette with his friend whose name is Jay Boyd and a crackhead whose name is Preacher from Chris' neighborhood on 6th Street. Somebody went and got food for Chris from Burger King on State Avenue, and Chris was sitting down eating his food, and somebody walked up behind him and shot Chris in the back of his head, and Jay Boyd ran out the house when he heard the shots. Another story that was told is Mushane, Julius, Dude, and more people made Chris beg for his life, and they all took turns shooting Chris. And they all went down to Sean Wright Mama house on 6th Street, whose name is Granny Jones. Jones said they were laughing and crying when telling her the news about Chris. And she called Tony Mama phone, who was at a friends and family beauty shop on 8th Street. CJ called Tony to come over because he had the girls over, and Nate and his friend Twong D was there to have sex with the girls. Tony wanted to come but had no right. While Tony was trying to figure it out, CJ continued what was going to happen without him. The girls went home, and the friend of the girl told her father that she had sex with 3 black men. The father was angry and forced his daughter to give him a name and address. A week later, CJ, Nick, and Plain D were called down to the Olathe, Kansas Police Department to give a statement on what happened that day. They all said nothing happened but one. The police questioned Nick, and the police told Nick, if you say you did it, you will get probation. The police tricked him to talk. At the time, Nick was 17, and the police locked him up a year later. And the rest of the gang, they were charged with having sex with a minor and put on the sex offender list. One day, Tony was home alone and heard a knock on the door. Tony looked out his living room window and seen a black man at his front door. Tony knew they was there to kill him and ran to the phone and called the police. The police got there and was asking Tony questions. Tony's mom was playing in the driveway and she got out the car and talked to the police officer. She said he was schizophrenia and been having problems and go to Johnson County Mental Health. And he had a social worker, and the police said, do you think he need to go somewhere? And Tony's mom said, yes. Tony's mom called Tony, social worker at Johnson County Mental Health in Shawnee Mission, but he was not there. She talked to the crisis team, so they left the house and went to Shawnee Mission Medical Center, where one of the guys from Johnson County Mental Health crisis team was waiting. In the hospital waiting room, there was barely any people there. They told Tony and the social worker from the crisis team to come and talk with him in a room. Tony and mom stay in the waiting room. The social worker was deciding where to send Tony, and the social worker went back out to the waiting room where Tony's mom was at. She said the waiting room is filling up fast with people. The social worker from the crisis team told Tony mom he was going to Osawatomie State Hospital, and Tony mom left the hospital. The police took Tony to another hospital named KU Medical Center, where he can get transferred to Osawatomie State Hospital. And a black male nurse gave Tony the shot with a needle, and the shot put Tony to sleep. And Tony woke up and looked and saw he was back of a bank on a high, and he stabbed until he got to Osawatomie State Hospital and went to sleep when he got there. The next day, the staff checked Tony in, and Tony went outside where the hospital patients was and was standing around, and a light-skinned guy with long hair and rings on his fingers walked to Tony and said, they'd better give me my money or I'm going to blow somebody's head off. Tony said to himself, now, I got a deal with this gangster dude, because Tony did not want to be there in the first place. After the patients and staff was done from smoking and being outside, they all went in, and Tony was sitting down in the TV room, and the same light-skinned guy was standing up talking to a black girl and said to her he looked just like the nigga. Tony heard that and know he was talking about his brother Chris, because Chris and Tony looked similar. The light-skinned guy walked to Tony and said, where are you from? And Tony said, Kansas City, Missouri. And the black girl asked the light-skinned guy, is that him? And the light-skinned guy said he was from Missouri. I don't know. Tony said that because he did not want them to know who he was. As Tony was sitting down, he started to see people he's seen before from Kansas City, Kansas. And the light-skinned guy asked Tony, do you have cousins in the town who rap? Tony said, I don't know. And Tony asked the light-skinned guy, do you know Sean Wright? The light-skinned guy said, no. And the next day, Tony got up and went to the TV room, and the light-skinned guy was walking back and forth up the hallway, rapping a song that Tony knew. It was Frank Nitty So Scandalous. He was rapping.
Either I hit you or you hit me, but if I hit you first, you ride away in a hearse. And what's worse, won't no one win, cause you'll be in the box and I'll be in the pen.
And said, you will be in a box and I will be in the pen. And the light-skinned guy said out loud, I don't give a fuck about this nigga. And a male nurse stopped to talk to the light-skinned guy. And the nurse said, what type of gun have you got? The light-skinned guy said, a 9. When Tony heard that he knew his life was in danger, Tony was scared and called his parents' house and told his dad that somebody was trying to kill him in the hospital. Tony's dad said, that's a state hospital. There ain't nobody coming in there. While Tony was on the phone, the electrician said, who are you talking to? It better not be the police. After Tony was done talking on the phone with his dad, he went to his room and seen the light-skinned guy in his bed, and Tony walked out the room and went outside, and the light-skinned guy came outside and was talking to a tall black guy. The tall guy said, "If I was you, I will shoot him 17 times in the neck." Tony went in and told the hospital staff and said, "This guy is trying to kill me and he got a gun." They said they will have a talk with him. Everybody who was outside came in, and the nurse asked him, "We need to search you." And the light-skinned guy went in the bathroom and came out. Tony seen that and went in the bathroom to see where he put the gun because Tony was go shoot him with it. They searched him and found nothing. And one of the hospital patient asked the light-skinned guy, "Are you in a gang?" And the light-skinned guy said, "Las Vegas, baby, Las Vegas, baby." And the light-skinned guy seen his friend coming down the hall, whose name was Ryan, a black teenager. They both was hyping themselves up to do something to Tony. Tony was scared and went to the staff desk, then was standing up, and the light-skinned guy was running toward Tony and stopped and hesitated. He did that multiple times in a row. Every time he was running toward Tony, Tony thought he was going to die. Tony stayed up all night at the nurse desk until the light-skinned guy went to his room, and Tony went to his room to go to sleep. And the next day, Tony was in his room, and a nurse came in and closed the door, and she started crying, and Tony told her that light-skinned guy was trying to kill him. She did not say anything the whole time she was in the room, but cried. Tony knows she knew that he was telling her the truth, but she could not do anything to help him. And the nurse left the room, and Tony left the room a short time after and was walking down the hall. And the light-skinned guy said to Tony, "It's about that time." What he was saying to Tony, "Is it about that time to die?" When Tony heard that, Tony bust out crying, and one of the hospital nurses said he's stupid. That same night, Tony's mom came to visit him, and she bought clothes for him to wear and a pack of cigarettes in the visit room. It had windows where you can see out where the patients was while Tony was in the visit room with his mom. Tony seen a light-skinned guy peeking at the window. Tony told his mom that people in the hospital is trying to kill him. She did not believe him. So Tony said, "I will prove it to you." Tony knocked on the door, and a nurse led him outside. And Tony stayed outside for a minute or two and went back in the visit room with his mom. They talked for a while, and Tony's mom left the hospital. And Tony went outside where the hospital patient was to smoke his cigarettes, and he seen the light-skinned guy smoking what the drug called PCP, because he smelled it. And Tony said to himself, "He is about to kill me." This time, Tony put his cigarette out and went back in and went and stand at the nurse desk, and the light-skinned guy came and ran up on Tony. He stopped and turned around and did the same thing over again, back and forth. While Tony was standing up at the nurse desk, a hospital patient who was a heavy-set white man came up to Tony and said, "You are going to heaven?" And Tony said, "Why you say that?" Then the white man said, "I can see a halo on your head." Tony looked up and seen angels surrounding him and felt his head was tilting back. And Tony stopped being scared. The light-skinned guy got madder and madder and went to the nurse desk and told the nurse to call the police right now. Call the police right now. And the nurse said, "No, why would I do that?" And the light-skinned guy pull out a box of bullets. That night, the staff decided to move Tony to another unit that was close to the same unit just a feet apart. Tony was on the same unit as the light-skinned guy friend whose name was Ryan. While Tony was outside smoking his cigarette, he seen a black girl talking real loud to the staff and said, "With my dick sucking ass," and went back in. A few minutes later, Tony went in, and the black girl walked to Tony and said, "Come and take a shower with me." And Tony went in the bathroom where the shower was. The black girl took her clothes off, and Tony took his clothes off, and they both got in the shower. The black girl bent over and gave Tony a plastic glove from the hospital. Tony said, "You got a booty?" And she said, "I know." While Tony was behind her, his penis would not get hard. And the black girl said it might be the medicine. The whole time Tony was thinking this might be a setup. The black girl turned around and sucked Tony's penis until she was tired and said to Tony, "I suck you dry." And Tony laughed, put his clothes back on, and left the bathroom. The next day, Tony was in the TV room and the black girl came in and asked Tony, "Can I grease your hair?" Tony said yes, and she sat down and started to grease her hair, and the black girl asked Tony, "Do you recognize anybody in here?" And Tony said no, and Young Jeezy Soul Survivor music video came on the TV, and Tony said, "That's Risk the Factor in the video." The black girl said, "No, that's not him." And the black girl said, "Oh, that is him." And the black girl said to Tony, "I'd be tricking for the police," and was telling Tony stories about a guy who was rich and had money. By that time, the staff on the unit got everybody ready to go to lunch in the cafeteria. While Tony was halfway there, the black girl gave Tony a Sprite that was open, and Tony drank it. After Tony got his food in the cafeteria and was sitting down, he seen the black girl dancing like MC Hammer and said to another guy in the cafeteria, "The boy is poison, the boy is poison." The black girl was saying it like the song Poison by Bell Beat Debo. After Tony heard that, he went to the bathroom and was feeling funny. Tony came out and ate his food and went back to the unit after everybody was done, and a light-skinned guy who's a little older and another guy whose name is Ryan was in the hallway, and the light-skinned guy came up behind Tony and said, "What's up, man?" and walked away. When Tony got home, he went to his Bible. Tony wanted to see what God was telling him, so he opened up the Bible. He did not pick a verse. It just landed on that page. This is what the verse said.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows.
Do you remember Tony saying he felt his head going back? And do you remember Tony was calling his parents? Tony closed the Bible and opened it again. The verse said,
"When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up."
And do you remember the light-skinned guy asked Tony, "Do you got cousins in the town who rapped?" Tony found out later he was talking about his cousins from CDF.
Try me, nigga, you must be silly. Hit a home run like I play for the Phillies. Then have a 9 wrap you up like a Philly. Then get back on the grid trying to make a milli. CD familiar, I ain't got an ass. I take a nigga out like last week trash. Had a 5-post bed 4 I smash. Toss that bitch like an alley-oop pass. Keep a 2 belt so I keep that 2. Get more pussy than an all-girl school. I'm so fly, gotta take flight school. You rap niggas starting to look like food. Flow so cold it'll write you a rap too long on the stove with a microwave at. Everybody wanna know where CDF at. We right here dead in the middle of the map. Hit him with the chop, make him lose his mind. Hit her one time, she say she mine. Boss my frame, do the hind and the fine. Too many wrinkles, grab that iron. Money so tall that your boy gotta climb. You a kitty cat compared to a lion. Hope you don't think that you got 9 lives. I'm the smoke, now here come the fire.
DS cute and I'm picking up where we left off. Cause I got the ability to get you pissed off. NASA gave me the green light to go. But spark the keys code, T minus 4 till I lift off. I'm surrounded by dogs, call me the pit boss. Like that big boy Hugo, better get lost. Lyrically punish MCs when I talk. Jesus did the wider thing, so I skywalk. Being in my presence a favor. I'll leave you shocked like a taser. Black you on out like Darth Vader. Clean up tracks nice, yeah, it's Taylor. Excuse me, rap it slow for a minute. I'm the president, I gotta talk to my senate. Got your bitch in the bedroom, give me head soon. So I guess I gotta make a bark for a minute. Landlord on the beat, y'all just tenants. Maybe she touch your privates, but you don't think I outrank you. Cause you gotta know she blow lieutenants. Got the zookeeper for y'all, yeah, because y'all beast tracks. But nigga, where my priest at? Because I R.I.P. tracks.
Tony and his dad went to a casino called Golden Eagle in Horton, Kansas. It was Tony's first time going to a casino. Tony's dad walked in and went straight to the crap table, and Tony watched his dad shoot dice. Tony's dad give Tony the dice to roll, and Tony was hitting numbers back to back and win $160. And Tony's dad said, "That's your money to keep." And Tony's dad got the dice back and rolled it for about 30 minutes. And they both left the casino. Tony was excited that he made that money shooting dice and wanted to come back, and him and his dad went back to the casino the next day. They got to the casino, and Tony's dad went to the craft table, and Tony went to the slots machines. After Tony was done, he went to the crap table to watch his dad. While Tony was at the crap table, he seen a heavy-set female with blonde hair and eyeglasses, the casino employee, looking at Tony and whispering, "You playing stupid." And another casino employee who was at the table was a white man with long hair, with eyeglasses, with one of his hand on his forehead, with an L sign shaped like a gun, and was staring at Tony with an evil look. And another casino employee who was standing up behind the crap table was talking about killing him. Tony was scared and wanted to leave, and one of the casino employees rubbed his nose on the side, up and down with his finger, using one finger to another casino employee. Tony seen that and realized that was a signal that the casino employee was telling the other casino employee that Tony found out what they was trying to do. Tony would go to the casino with his dad because he would be scared to stay at home by himself. One night, Tony was at the Golden Eagle Casino, and it was crowded with people. Tony heard the casino employees talking about his brother Nick, who was in prison at the time. So Tony went out to the casino door where the payphone was at and called his house to check on his family. Tony asked his mom, did his brother Nick call? She said no, and they both hung up the phone. Tony went back in the casino where his dad was at the crab table, and Tony was mean-mugging the casino employees who was there at the table. Tony seen a white man walking wearing a black suit with a ponytail, carrying a briefcase, and went in the back room of the casino. 10 minutes later, the guy came back out carrying the briefcase and was walking toward the door. And a black girl who was a few feet from Tony said to a black guy, "I told you, my boys don't play." And a group of casino employees was together. One said, "I'm going to get the ice." And another casino employee, whose name is Brandon, said, "I'm going to get the food." Tony was trying to figure out what did they do. That same week, Tony, brother Nick, called the house and was confused and was mumbling words. Tony thought Nick was high on something. He talked to Nick for a few minutes, and Tony told his mom and dad about Nick, that he was not sounding right on the phone when his parents got home. And the next day, Nick was in the hospital. Tony and his parents and Nick's daughter rushed to the hospital in El Dorado, Kansas. When they got there, Nick was still confused and was mumbling words. They stayed for a few hours, and Tony's parents asked Tony, "Do you want to stay with Nick? Because we need to go back home." Tony said, "I'm coming with y'all." And they left, driving back to their house. And the next day, Tony's parents got a phone call from the hospital, and they said Nick was in bad condition. So again, they rushed to the hospital, and Nick was on a machine and was in a coma and on life support. And a police officer was in the room whose name was Roger Smith, and he was smiling at Nick. Tony seen that and was mad. He wanted to stab the police officer with a screwdriver he brought from the house that was in his coat pocket. But Tony heard God saying, "Do not do that." The police officer asked Tony's parents, "Are you going to get the hotel?" Tony's parents said, "We might." And the police officer moved his vest around on his chest and told somebody who was there with him, "Don't pump out." Tony heard that and was mad. He knew the police was involved with the people from the casino. Tony knew that the police officer was trying to kill him and his family. A few seconds later, Tony